Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
So welcome everybody to Angelscapes. And I want to ask you, what do you suppose 2023 is going to bring you? And what pieces of the puzzle do you actually have in your hand that you're planning and you're intending to move forward? And I want to say, how about this? Want to go prospecting for some gold for 2023? Hello, this is Angelscapes, and I'm your host, Nancy Smith. And joining me is Marc Lainhart, the intuitive prospector. Let's go prospecting for the many truths to be revealed in the year 2023. We will be talking to Marc about a lot of his intuitions and a lot of things that he has in mind. And then afterwards, we're going to do a live reading. We're going to put one card polls. And if you have any questions, you can put them into the Facebook thing and we'll be reading them. Marc does spiritual consulting on life, on loss, on love. He's based in Seattle, Washington. He's a minister, and he is award-winning British-trained psychic and spiritual medium, and through Best American Psychics 2020 Psychic of the Year. Marc's work as a radio show host, a hiking guide, a metaphysical teacher, inspirational thought leader. He's a certified healthcare provider, and he's a writer striving to help, inspire, guide, and teach and transform others in connecting to spirit, self, and this wonderful world around us. Mike, with his own near-death experience, out-of-body experience, and several personal tragedies along the way, Marc has spent the last 2 decades deciphering and demystifying the sensational subject matter of death and dying, and now endeavors to help others from around the world into and flex their intuitive muscles and abilities with a deeper understanding and awareness of after-death communications, as well as your own intuition on your life now. And that's what this show is about. Welcome, Marc.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Excited to have you. Yeah. It's what?
Thank you for allowing me to come on and do
prospecting. Yes, we're going to do prospecting. I was excited to listen to you Monday. Yesterday was Monday, right? On your regular Monday show, which is phenomenal. What time is it usually every Monday? What in the Eastern Standard Time? What is the Western Pacific time?
Metaphysical Mocha Mondays every Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here in Seattle. So that would make it 11 a.m. Eastern time. And we go every Monday to explore and discover and chat and have coffee and find that diamond within. So
the show is always great. I've watched it several times, and I never let you know that I'm watching it, but this time I did. And I recommend watching it and going there. You give a lot of information. You give a lot of input or how you're seeing the world now, but then you give these one card readings. And I find that when I'm listening to the readings, I'm getting a lot more information too about what's happening and what's going on. So it may sound personal, but it's really beyond personal. So I recommend his show, and you can find you on marclainhart.com. And so tell us what is up for 2023 and how do you get that information?
Yeah, so a lot going on for 2023. So let's start with in numerology, because there's a lot of different tools that I use for the spiritual toolbox. Just like if you think of it like a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter, when they're working on their project, they bring tools with them and they open up that spiritual, or they open up their toolbox and grab the tools they need to do the thing. So spiritualism is really psychic or mediumship or intuition or mindfulness, metaphysics. It's very much the same way. And so I have a lot of different tools that I can use, including my own intuition, to look at the year ahead. And one of the tools that I love to use is numerology. And numerology, now there's about 4 different types of numerology, but I subscribe to the Pythagorean type of numerology. It goes back to Pythagorean, who many years ago, as far back as we've been able to record, it's about 11,000 years old for philosophy. So we're going back towards the time of the pyramids, because the pyramids are projected to be about 12,000 years old. So numerology is the language of the universe, if you will, because it's the numbers and the sequence and how things go in cycles. Just like, right now we're in winter, spring is just right around the corner, and then we go into summer and winter, and it's a cycle thing. So one of the tools that I like to use is astrology, but numerology. And then I also look at patterns and trends and what's going on with our society. And I like to teach on signs, symbols, synergy, synchronicities. We can talk about that a little bit later in the show, what those mean. But when you start to realize that communication is bigger than just a vibration off a vocal cord, realize that there's a lot of communications going on. So when I reach into my spiritual toolbox and I pull out and start working with numbers, and it's funny because all through high school and college, I was not a math guy. I did it to get through, jump through that hoop, but I did not like mathematics. I didn't understand. So it would be years later, as I started to develop my intuitive journey, that numbers, I started seeing patterns in numbers, and people talk about this all the time: 111, 222, 333, 444. And I started to look at sacred geometry, and I started to look at how numbers can influence us. In fact, right now, numbers are influencing our technology behind the scenes, because technology is based on code, numbers, sequences, right? And so this year, as I look and forecast, and I like to say forecast because people, when people learn that I'm a psychic, and they're like, oh, you're doing predictions, you're doing projection into the future, or you're doing forecast. And I always just want to remind your audience that it's a forecast. It's never 100% accurate. I don't know a medium or a psychic that is ever 100% accurate, but it's like the weatherman. The weatherman can do a pretty good job using his tools, his technology to forecast. And that's what I like to do. I like to forecast and project into the future, but also remind the best part about our future is it comes one day at a time, the now. So tonight we're going to talk about truth. And 2023, and what you do with numerology, one of the tools I'm going to use tonight is you take the year of 2023 and you add those numbers across, and that adds up to a total number. In this case, it's the year of the 7. So what happens in the year of the 7, it's a very interesting transformational time for our planet, for our species. It's the 7 energy of truth, universal truth. Now, the last time that we were in this exact same numerology sequence was back in 1960. And if you think about the 60s and the civil rights movement, we just celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. This happens about every 63 years. So the next time that this exact numerology cycle of truth won't be till around 2086, looking at the numbers. And so what that does is it is preparing us for truth. And what I mean by truth is sometimes received well, and other times it's not received well. And so the 7 number, one of the most spiritual numbers referenced, but regardless of your religion, if you take the top 10 religions, the 7 sequence, the 7th sign, the 7 notes in music, the 7 colors of the rainbow, the word friend has 7 letters in it, 7 continents that make up our world. 7 is referenced as a universal number and used very exclusively. Yeah. And it's funny because it was actually known to be Pythagorean's favorite number, right? The lucky number 7. But what the 7 also instills this year, not along with just truth, but it's a number of wisdom. It's a number of intelligence. It's a number of logic and learning and spiritual growth. So this year, if people decide they want to grow and lean into their own truths, then that's what that number will reflect for them. Now, it's called the truth seeker. So it's for people that really want to, look at truth. And myself, I'm not a life path 7, but I am a truth seeker because I've always been fascinated by the mysteries and the wonders and the mystic of not just our planet, but what is seen and what is unseen. I always say we have 3 eyes in life: 2 to look, 1 to see. And when you go through these number sequences for the year of truth, there's always a positive aspect of the wisdom, intelligent logic that I'm talking about, but there's also that negative connotation that can bring, ignorance or unwillingness, unwillingness to accept facts, misinformation, absurdity on its face, if you will. And so that's what this year is going to really represent for our society moving forward. And it's going to impact everything from science, technology, politics, global economy. It's going to be a very interesting year during our Roaring 20s, which I said back in 2019 for the age of Aquarius, that buckle up, the Roaring 20s are going to be very transformative for all of us.
I've even seen articles that some of the 20 styles are coming back in fashion. I don't know if you noticed that, like the cats and just different. I'm like, oh, well, that's telling. But yeah, Roaring 20s. So enjoy it while you have it. But the due day is coming. But
Exactly.
yeah. I often sometimes think that we can see, we who work intuitively, or we work looking at things more spiritually or globally, from that, for instance, numerology point of view, or astrology point of view, or just spiritual point of view, see things, and we're used to seeing things, or we're prepared for things. But then you have a whole group of people who don't have that way to see things or inclination to see things, and it just feels like, for me, a peeling away of I don't want to see it, I don't want to see it, now I can't. The elephant's in the room, I have to see it. And you can have an elephant in the room and still not see it. So let's talk a little bit about how this year is going to peel away some of that, so that people can actually see what's truly going on the planet.
Yeah, so there's always that old adage, ignorance is bliss, right? Some people will choose not to see it. Our greatest power and responsibility why we're here in life, Nancy, is the free will and the choice, the choose to see, the choice not to see. And so, there's part of our, pockets of society around the globe that will just like the status quo. And that's fine. There's no judgment or opinion. But, when it's a year of truth, when you get the rug pulled out from underneath you, when truths are revealed, that disrupts status quo. That's a paradigm shift. That's a tipping point. And I always remind people, the word fear, we have a lot of fear in our society today. And I always, when I'm faced with fear, and I've been faced with real fear, what I mean by that is, in life, the jobs that I used to do, being in the Coast Guard and now a retired firefighter, EMT, there are many times that I had fear based on what I was doing. And the body does one of three things: fight, flight, or freeze. Now, anything else we create in our mind. So I always say, when there's something that's fear-based and you have a truth that's going to be revealed this year, don't go to the place of fear, which for me is false evidence appearing real. And go, okay, I'm not going to buy into that fear. I always flip it and say, let's use fear as face everything and rise. And I always, tell people, replace fear with the unknown with curiosity. A lot of times we go to fear when we don't understand something that's taking place, myself included. There was many times before I started down this journey of going into the psychic sciences, mediumship, metaphysics, meditation. There was some things that, I didn't understand, and it would go to that place, that mindset of fear, something that was either instilled and learned as a child, or a religious upbringing, or a Hollywood movie that I saw. One that comes to mind, because I'm a big M. Night Shyamalan fan, the director of
love his stuff. Yeah,
Signs and the Sixth Sense. But in Hollywood, he's got that imagination, and he replaces the fear of the unknown with that curiosity. So that's what I would say is, when these truths are going to be revealed this year based on free will and choice, move into curiosity, not to fear. That's why media does so well. That's why newspapers and news industries do so well, because when they're reporting, a lot of it is always fear-based, or the doom and gloom. And I think we're so much bigger than that. Is we can take the truths and turn that into curiosity, not fear, and then maybe find the root cause is actually quite simple for something we thought was very fearful, and it didn't need to be, if you will.
Yeah, I've seen so many times people face that fear and they said, oh, it's very tiny. Sometimes it's our inner children that are a fear, our inner vulnerable selves who are very tiny. So everything looks very big, but the curiosity and love is also a really good, knowing that we are in a universe of love and caring, although it doesn't feel like it lots of times. But when we are afraid of something, remember that there is that spiritual love around us. if you can get there. But I do like the curiosity, because that's what makes you go forward. It's like, hey, what's the next thing? And I think curiosity, again, will open the doors to seeing. I see a lot of people have things right in front of them. You talked a lot of Monday, yesterday. You went through economy, you went through world, maybe some wars in between, and then you went into even some extraterrestrial realizations. So love to.
Little green men, oh my goodness, not the extra dimensional beings, not little green men. Yeah, there's a lot of those curiosities, and like I was talking yesterday, it's really hard for people to relate when they haven't had the experience themselves.
Right.
Now, when you are hallucinating, people will call you crazy because you maybe hallucinate something. But if somebody else hallucinates, they call that religion, right? And so, for me, because of the experiences I've had based on, and I've had 2 in my life so far, not just near-death experiences, but also extra dimensional intelligence. Doesn't mean little green men. Now that's fun because I'm a big Star Wars fan, obviously. But there is an intelligence out there that has been with us for many, many, many years. This isn't something new. And it's one of the longest, if you think about it, it's one of the longest conspiracy theories running since recorded time. You can track them through storytelling, through writings, through paintings, all the way back to the 11, 12, 1300s. And, there's even books referenced in scripture. The book of Enoch comes to my mind. When you read it and then you apply the extra dimensional beings or aliens or UFOs, you're like, was that really, is it an angel or is it an alien, right? And that goes back to what we were just saying. What we don't understand leads us to fear, and we can go back to our religious beliefs or our upbringing and be, the status quo. And I don't need to believe that. I don't need to even put thought in that. Mm-hmm. But based on the experiences that I've had in my journey so far, I know, just like I know death is not the end, I know that there are more species either on this planet today that are more intelligent than us than what meets the eye. And I would even say there's 3 species that are more intelligent than us that we're aware of right now. That's the whale, the dolphin, and the octopus. And they all live in the ocean. So that's going to be some more truths that are going to start to be revealed, because our ocean has a lot of truth. We only understand about 7% of our ocean, and we're covered by 70%. The planet itself is 70% covered in water. So as the oceans reveal itself with more, as our technology grows and our awareness grows, I say that, octopi and whale and dolphins are more intelligent than us because, one, whales and dolphins communicate with one another. So communication is a sign of intelligence, but they also live in harmony with their environment. Humans, not so much. And we're seeing that with our planet, what we're doing to our planet. And they live in peace and they live in harmony, and they nurse their young as mammals. Now, the octopus is interesting. We talked about this recently. There's a documentary called My Octopus Teacher on Netflix.
Yes, yeah.
Fabulous.
Everyone should see it. Yeah. Yeah.
And when people say, if we take the little green men equation out of it, have you ever seen an alien, Mark? And I say, yeah, I see them all the time. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah. As an advanced certified diver, when I drop down into the ocean in that terrestrial world and I have interactions with octopus, the octopus is the only species on the planet that has no direct relative anywhere, and its DNA is unique to planet Earth. So logically thinking, if it doesn't have a relation or a cousin like a giraffe or an elephant, and it doesn't come from Earth, then that means it is extraterrestrial. It comes from someplace else. Therefore, it makes it an alien. So when I break it down like that, people go, that's kind of interesting. That's, I didn't think about it that way. We've always, the Hollywood movies with the big ship landing in front of the White House and blowing the White House. Today, we don't know them to be nefarious. We don't know them to be, and I hope they aren't, because if they're advanced, that means that violence wouldn't be in their vocabulary or their DNA, because violence is a very, very low form of intelligence. And as of right now, until assumed otherwise, I don't see them as a threat to us. They're observing us, and they're slowly, I call it the drip, drip, drip. And this isn't Mark's opinion. There are several reports out now by our government, by our intelligence committee, by the Freedom of Information Act, and including just a few days ago, 2 things that were very interesting based on ufology, UFOs and UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon now is what the government is call it, so UFOs. But our intelligence committee has now, quote unquote, determined that these UAPs are of non-man-made origin. So you think about that, and you put that out to the public and go, What do you mean it's non-man-made? So that means it can't come from China. It can't come from Russia. It's not an advanced black box secret government project. It's of non-man-made origin. So this drip, drip, drip is starting to come out. And just a few days ago, there was a flight from Phoenix to Hawaii that encountered severe turbulence. It was a clean flight, smooth all the way through, and they were about 20 minutes outside of Hawaii to land. And the pilot now has been recorded through FCC radio communications that a cloud shot up in front of the plane at a very high velocity. And after passing through the cloud within about 40 seconds, that's when the plane went into its severe turbulence and injured 25 people.
I think there was a color to it, wasn't it? Like some kind of pink or rosy color. It was different.
Moved, the pilot said it moved at a velocity not made to, it defies the laws of gravity. So if it defies the laws of gravity, therefore it defies physics as we understand it today, which means that there's something more advanced that is interacting.
You see a motor in it or something is moving it along. Not, that's not going along with the natural flow on the planet, whatever. Yeah, I find that fascinating. And what was that? And I always wondered if there would be kind of air control problems. we have a lot of flying things that are not, airplanes, but
well, if you think about it, we have Space Force now, right? We had an army. The army became the Air Force as we started to move into the air. Now the Air Force has now evolved into Space Force. We have people going into space for space travel. Captain Kirk, William Shatner just went to space. As we move out into space, we're going to start to, explore just like we've explored our planet. But we haven't even explored all of our planet yet, right? We still haven't even gone, we don't even know about Antarctica, the great white continent down below. And as we continue to evolve and understand and become aware, Eckhart Tolle talked about awareness becomes the greatest agent for change. Change is going to be truth, and truth is going to be hard for some people, because when you realize that we're not alone in the universe and that there is another intelligent species out there besides humans, then you go, okay, that changes religion, that changes science, that changes philosophy, that changes religion. In fact, NASA just a few months ago pulled 24 of the top theologians from different religions into a conference for the weekend and said, when we announce this, not if, but when, what does the world do? Does it go to chaos? Does it go to martial law? Or does it go to this great coming together, which I've seen the great coming together, not chaos and martial law. And, you don't pay for theologians to come to a conference unless you have information and data that supports a finding.
Something. Finding that's outside of,
it's just about how they're going to release it to us and when they're going to release it to us. But we've been having this conversation for 70 plus years since Roswell took place. And if you look at our technology, it's very interesting, Nancy, in the fact that if you take the course of history, we've had small bumps in the indoor plumbing, electricity. We started the automobile, the airplane, and then all of a sudden, right around the 40s, it skyrockets and the data just goes way up. And for me, we found something. We started reverse engineering that puts the technology in our hands today that we're talking here, Zoom and broadcasting on Facebook.
Yeah,
So,
Even the development of Wi-Fi is fascinating to me. Somebody, and I also feel, if we talk about alien technology, I feel that there's a lot of channelers out there. There's a lot of people that I feel like Tesla was channeled a lot of really brilliant information, and
he talked about it.
And if you go
about dimensional beings,
exactly, and then if you go even back to the chemistry, who's that guy that created the periodic table? Mendeleev. Anyway, he saw the periodic table, was trying to figure out the earth elements and how they were organized together. And he tried decades. He worked on this thing until one day he had a vision and they all went up together and organized themselves. And so there were blocks of elements and there were blank boxes. And he drew it out. They still use it today. And all those blank boxes are filled. It makes total sense of his organizational principles fit into the findings after. Where did that come from? I feel like it came from, a higher intelligence or a higher knowing. And it's easy, however that came from, we have these subconscious minds that connect to the one mind, so that all bets are off. We have this huge grid around the universe that brings us information. So why wouldn't we progress if we're willing to use that part of our mind?
Right. If we're willing, free will and choice identified. So you're talking about Dimitri Mendeleev.
Mendeleev, yeah.
who was the in 1869, he was the Russian chemist that started to put, and that's very interesting because the periodic table, even just applied to ufology, the conversation we're having right now, there's an element called element 115, and it's been added to the periodic table, and it's a very interesting conversation. We probably could spend another hour on another show talking about just element 115, but your audience can go start to research, and it was added in the, I believe, the late 90s, where both US and Russia scientists were working together, and supposedly the story is they discovered this element 115, and it's now part of the periodic table. But I want to go back real quick, if we can, to you talked about Nikola Tesla, who was in history and in research known as the father of frequency. And he was working with different frequencies, the Tesla towers in Colorado. And he actually talked about in 1860, so we're in 1869, 1865, there was a lot of things that were starting to come into our reality, the periodic table, frequency and vibration. And he talked about a little black box. And he said in 1865, there's going to be a little black box where people can connect to anybody they want to around the world. And people at that time, the thought process, that guy's a witch, that guy's a warlock, and they stripped him of all of his patents. They stole everything from him. And he's probably one of the most dynamic. You take him, Leonardo da Vinci, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, technology, even Elon Musk today. These guys are tuning in and tapping into knowledge and information that is all around us. It's always there. It's just how do we get to download it, right? And when he said that in 1865, even Stanley Kubrick in 2001: A Space Odyssey, when he presented the black monolith, have you ever seen the movie?
Yes, yeah. And they touched it. They touched that.
The humanoid monkey or the Neanderthal touches the black box. He wanted to present a movie back in the late 60s to show how first contact takes place, because it is intelligence, not a little green men. It's just this big black sphere, and the Neanderthal touches it and it develops intelligence. So there's a lot of things out there, even in art. I always say, is art imitating life, or is life imitating art? That is the question.
Well, you look at Jules Verne. I mean, I know we're doing a little history here. We'll probably step into what that it has to apply with 2023. You look at Jules Verne and even Gene Roddenberry. I feel like they had visions. Probably a lot of them did. Had visions of things to come. And sometimes they feel like they know a certain truth, or they know something, and let's tell a story about it. I think it's our movies and media is what's going to bring people around to understanding what's really going on, to socialize them, to naturalize them, to not be as frightened, to become more curious. But I also feel, and I've heard this said, and I've experienced it, that there's another plane of existence. We talk about vibration, and we're vibrating in a frequency, a certain frequency, a three-dimensional. And then I know that as we do mediumship work, or we do spiritual work, we step into another frequency. We're kind of 1 foot on this side and 1 foot a little further. And when you step into that other frequency, you see a lot of things, and you have premonitions, but a sense of relationships that aren't necessarily in the 3D human world. And to me, I feel like that is kind of people's frequencies, people's ability to see, or their minds are developing into a kind of a more active phase. I know that we have the different brain waves that go through our head while we're meditating, the alpha wave, and then we go to the theta wave. And when you step into those different brainwave states, your perceptions shift a little bit. I think that's part of what's happening. There's so many more people meditating, or so many more people looking beyond what's right in front of us. There's a story, 14th century. They were very, people loved their meteorites. They were very aware of meteorites, thinking something's coming from heaven, gifts from God or something. And they built this huge meteorite, huge. They built this church around it. And we're not worshiping the meteor, but talking about the wonder of God and nature. And then at some point, some bishop came along and said, there's no such things as meteors. So he told the whole community. And so they were hiding their rocks or throwing them away. But there was this problem with this big meteor in the middle of the church, so they just pretended it wasn't there. So for a whole generation, this bishop terrorized these people into believing that there were no meteors until he moved on, and then they were allowed to believe in meteors. But isn't that interesting? What a mindset, that was a fear based. If you see this, then you are against God, kind of thing, and that's very scary to be that in the 14th century. But having said that, how many things do we have in our current society that are meteors? You better not see that. And it's right there. It's right there. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like there's something happening this year, 23, going into 24, that is like a curtain rod that's just pulling the curtains open. Can you see that happening a little bit?
I can. And, it's like the Wizard of Oz, all of the smoke and mirrors, and you pull the curtain back and it's just a regular guy working on the levers, right?
Mhm.
So going back to, you talked about the 1400s, and even if we go back to the dark medieval times, they covered mirrors and outlawed mirrors because mirrors were when a mirror was created, you had to have a lot of money to have a mirror, and that was a view into a portal into another dimension. So we talk about the dimension even way back then. But I'm not a big, I don't trust and put all my faith and hope in history, because history is written by those that control the time. And we know, based on, you talked about the meteorites and religion, because religion is based on fear, dogma, control. We know that from history. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. And we know at times that, before priests, people would go to oracles, people would go to psychics, people would go to mediums. And over time, Constantine comes in around 300 AD and says, no, you need to go to a priest. You need to go to our institutionalized way of, so we can, control the narrative. And so this is happening. We're crossing the threshold where truth is going to be, the truth of it is going to be attacked when we're surrounded by just tons of conspiracy. That's just, that is just a normal way of, response. And again, it comes down to, do people want their lives to change? Do they want to keep the blinders on and just stay in their lane? Do they want status quo? Do they want to see change? But I can tell you from, if we go back to the toolbox of, Pythagorean's 7, it talks about, and I wrote some notes down here, it's at its best, the 7 is a highly intelligent, romantic dreamer with great imagination. So if you think about the 7 energy, and I don't subscribe to January 1st being the year to the end of December 31st. The years, now the calendar would state that, but I see from numerology, things bleed over into the next year, just like 2021 bled into 2022. We, at the end of 2022, discovered fusion, and we're not talking about that from a scientific standpoint.
I know, right?
Fusion is harnessing the energy of the sun without actually putting the energy of the sun into it. And in late December, it was announced by our energy department that we have discovered fusion. And if you tie Gene Roddenberry, that you talked about just a few minutes ago, Gene Roddenberry, after his death, his wife did determine and factually state that he was a seer. He wrote based on seeing things in the future of what he would saw science fiction eventually becoming science fact. And guess what? What the Starship Enterprise is based off of? Fusion. What is the warp drive? Fusion. And if we can start to harness fusion, that's going to be a truth that's going to start to take us away from fossil fuels and create an industry and a new way of thinking and doing and traveling based off seawater, which we have 70% of the planet's seawater. So we have a lot of resource there, but it's fusion that allows us to go to the stars at great distances and faster speeds. And that's not a conversation we're really having. I saw that, I was like, come on, really? You've actually discovered fusion? And they did. That's a big thing. And for your audience, think about when we go back to the early 1900s, everything was run off, fuel. Torch and candles and light. That's how we lit up our world at night. And then they had the World Fair in Chicago, and they lit up the whole street with electricity, AC versus DC. The battle of which one was more safer. And today you can see our planet from outer space. The whole world has been lit up. Fusion will be that same thing of truth for our planet as we move forward through 2020.
And it's going to figure it out. It's like it's discovering electricity. And how long was this electricity around before somebody said, you can put it, into, you can send it out there in wires. So fusion may have its journey, but maybe I don't think it's going to be a slow journey. To be honest with you, things
once the genie's out of the bottle, it's really hard to put it back in. But you're right. You make a very good point, Nancy. and the fact that those that control the narrative, just like penicillin, when penicillin was discovered, they wanted to monetize it. And the scientist, was that Pasteur, said,
Louis Pasteur,
no, this is going to be for everybody. And we have antibiotics today because of him. But imagine if that narrative would have been controlled just on the antibiotics of medicine.
Yeah.
Same thing with electricity. Same thing with fusion. There's going to be narratives, but we're at a place now where we have the internet. We have the internet sleuths that can get to truth. We just had that horrific murder here in Idaho.
Idaho.
Which is right next.
Oh, we had a horrific murder here too. So anyway, tell me what happened out there.
So it's made national news. The 4 students that were killed in the University of
Idaho.
I'm actually friends with the grandmother of the son.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And it's interesting because they've caught the guy and they've brought him back, but it was the internet. It was these internet sleuths. They're called sleuths that go and investigate and look for data. That truth back, 30, 40 years ago, he probably would have got away with it, even with the DNA that we know today. Your DNA is truth, right? And they've now brought him into custody and he's guilty of sin. I know you have to go through your, due process of the criminal, courts to be convicted, but with all the information that they have, with all the DNA that they have, he was there. It places him at the scene. And so that's a truth of, you're not going to be able to get away with stuff like you could in the past because of our technology, because of our DNA. DNA sequence alone has changed to where they can now solve murders from the past by doing reverse DNA.
Amazing.
Relatives,
just amazing.
Right?
Just amazing. Yeah. I think this kid, smart as he was, knew that was it. I'm done. I'm like, I'm guilty. I'm done. I know you got me. But
and he was studying criminal justice. That's what he was at WSU. He was studying. Serial killers are not dumb. Put it that way.
They're usually pretty brilliant. Pretty brilliant. Yeah, that's true. So we have other things to talk about for 2023. Now, let's talk a little bit, finishing up this conversation, is there will be some things revealed based on the breakdown of secrecy, the breakdown of some systems around and the willingness or the curiosity that some people say, I just have to know. I just want to know. I want it out there. What do you suppose how it will unfold? What's your
Well, I think our technology is helping us to set us free with truth, because you can't control the narrative as much. Everybody has a phone now. Everybody has one of these little black boxes in their hand. And you can only control the narrative so much, but when you put technology out into the hands of people, the truths are really, think about this war with Ukraine and Russia. Think about World War II, how different World War II would have turned out if we had technology like this and we could report real time and journalism and the race for the bomb to drop the bomb first. Because if Germany would have dropped the bomb first, we would be under German, Hitler, Nazi regime today versus the United States of America. So you think about how technology can change and bring forth the truth. And that's why my forecasting, going back to that forecasting, I had forecasted during our roaring 20s this decade, we would actually be able to determine that we're not alone in the universe. So some of the big truths that I see coming out, space is going to continue with our technology, the James Webb Telescope, the Hubble Telescope, the Kepler Telescope. Every day we're learning more of what we didn't know to be true. And if we come down to Earth, we know the microscope did the same thing. We know the telescope looking up did the same thing. And it caused a lot of anarchy and a lot of paradigm shifts and a lot of status quo to be challenged. In fact, Copernicus, when he said, when he told the religious leaders of the time, hey, hate to break the news to you, but the sun isn't going around the earth is going around the sun. They imprisoned him for the rest of his life, the last 12 years of his life in home, right? So, as our technology improves and increases based off Moore's law, every 18 months technology changes. That's how quick the technology is changing. If you think about where we went from the 1940s to where we're at today, imagine what the next 20 years is going to look like. Imagine what the next
just talking about that. I think we're in 5 years. I'm giving it 5 years and it's going to be something totally different. But I also feel like in 5 years, I think the planet's going to look a little different as well. And so we were having those discussions too, but some of the technologies that are coming out because the planet is changing, that will be really fascinating, I think.
The makeup, the truth also will be the makeup of not only the planet, but the boundaries of what we call states or countries, that will also have a different makeup, including the United States of America. I do not see the United States of America, and this is a truth that some of, I always say I'm like a buffet. You can pick and choose what I say, what you like, what you don't like, what you agree, what you don't agree with, and we can always agree to disagree respectfully and civilly. But I don't, in the next decade, I don't see the United States being the same makeup as it is today based off states. I do see that there's a shift coming, a paradigm shift based on ideology, based on philosophies, based on religions, based on politics. That's going to change the makeup. But the truths are going to be tied to our technology. And the big truths that I talked about this year in 2023, space, the ocean, currency, and Antarctica are going to be four of the big truths that are going to start to be revealed. The Great White Continent. I always just say, follow the money. If you don't like C-SPAN, you can get some very interesting things from C-SPAN. If you don't know what Freedom of Information Act is, look it up, because there's a lot of information at our fingertips. It's just, are we willing to put in the work and the research to find the truth?
Well,
and that's where the internet sleuths come in, to finding and helping with truth through technology. And the big four is going to be Antarctica, the ocean, space, and currency. And we're not talking about that a lot. So it's interesting.
Yeah, the economy, going back to currency, I have been seeing, just in my blips of seeing things. I'm not a really good person for grabbing out the truth and getting on technology. I wish I was better at it. I also can hire somebody to do it. But I do have my vision or my seeing, and I've seen the currency for a lot of years continually to changing the color, changing how we use it, changing what is valuable, what it's based on. And I have done a little bit of reading. And so once I'm sensitive to something, I'll catch an article here, I'll catch an article there. That's like, that's what I'm talking about. But there is, I know, a lot of work in probably in the country and in the government, economists that have been coming together trying to figure out, what are we going to do with this? What's going to happen with this? Where is this going? And I have felt for a long time that we have just had one Band-Aid fix after another, so that we could still look the same, act like we're doing the same, but the currency that we're working with, the value that we're working with as regular people, isn't the same as it used to be. It's something different, but I couldn't tell you what the heck it was, because I think it's just little piecemeals, and I think that machine is getting ready to fall apart a little bit. If that makes sense to you. I don't know if you have more information on that, but
it does, because if you just follow the path of history, right? We've got the horse and buggy that gives way to the automobile, right? Ford starts to create the automobile, and dirt roads start to become paved roads. And then the Wright brothers and Kitty Hawk, who against all science and all experts at the time said we'd never achieve flight, because when you think about flight, you're actually going into the wind to give rise to the wings to take off. You're actually going against the laws of physics and science as they understood it then. So imagine back in the early 1900s, electricity, flight, automobiles, and that gives way to what we accept as normal today. But during those times of transformations and truth, it creates a lot of chaos in Antarctica, people that don't want to change, people that just have that, closed mind. And when we start to move into space and international space travel, and it's just a matter of time, within this year, we're going to have flying cars. That is just literally right around the corner. Think of the Jetsons, right? Flying cars that can get you to where you're going, and we start to move up into the air from roads now into the air. And a lot of the people that have a lot of money, the elites class, fly anyway. They have their own helicopters, their own jets. But now the regular middle class consumers are going to be able to get into a taxi and Uber, go into a building, go up and catch the Uber, and then go to your next location based on flight. We have drones. So we're moving into this next segment of evolution. And as we push out and push up, that's also going to be, the space station is going to move into the space hotel. I'm thinking 2001: A Space Odyssey, when it jumps to the future, it's that big rotation hotel. We're going to go to the moon. We just sent a mission back from the moon to actually, look at the moon for a landing, to have a base there, and then on to Mars. And that's, in the next 20 years is going to be very transformative. there's a quote from David Attenborough, who was an executive for the BBC. And when televisions came into the home, there was a lot of controversy. There was how do journalists, present factual stories. And there was a doctrine called the Fairness Doctrine Act of 1949 that mandated that televisions had to do that. In the 80s, they got rid of that, and we had cable news. And now we have, there's no really professional journalism. So that's why I tell people, do your own research, do what's right for you. But he said, quote, "It's clear that we'll have to change the way we live and use our resources. We are at a crossroads where we can choose to cooperate or carry on regardless. Can our intelligence save us? I hope so," end quote. And I'm with him because I really believe that, 70% of the population in history past, again, going back to history, 70% wants to move forward, 30% will never want to move forward. The books behind me are the actual diaries of Ulysses S. Grant and Abraham Lincoln, who I read people of the past to read their thoughts of the time. And you'll realize we're not much different from that time of the Civil War than we are right now. We're a little bit more fancier dressed, maybe a little bit more clean shaven, and a lot more technology, but the mindset hasn't changed compared to where we're at. And history repeats itself. Not the same, it has a rhyme and rhythm, as Mark Twain talked about. It doesn't repeat itself exactly, but like you said earlier on, you're seeing the 20s fashion come back. I saw a lot of the 80s fashions come back. So things come back, but just in a different way. And as we move into the year of truth, these truths will be accepted by 70%, and they will not be accepted by 30%.
30%. We're gonna sit exactly where they've been sitting. And what are you gonna do? I mean, move forward.
That's why we have wars. That's why wars are fought, based on progress, to move the mindset where, the Civil War was based not just on slavery, it was based on the economy of the 7 states that started the Civil War. They didn't want to give up slavery because of the economy. And we talked about money, going back to your question. Here we have plastic credit cards, but we didn't have, before plastic credit cards, we dealt with currency like coin. We used to have coin, and then we started chopping down trees to turn it into paper, to buy stuff and commoditize to, live here on the planet. We're the only species that pays to live here on planet Earth. Think about that. Now the plastic is being transformed into digital currency. I don't even carry cash on me anymore. Everything is digital. And now we have Bitcoin. Now we have actual digital currency that is not safe. And that's going to bring down the economies of the world. And just a little bit of news that's going on right now, countries like Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, North Korea, India have all pulled together to develop a new currency backed by gold. The US dollar is not backed by gold, it's backed by nothing. And when you have nothing to back it, it ends up being a house of cards. And so the economy, the truth of the economy and cash is going to change for society. And that's going to be hard for a lot of people to accept.
No, yeah, I think so. My sense is that it'll be hard for people to accept, but don't get scared. Don't get afraid. There's plenty of resources for everybody. There's enough to eat. There's enough. It's just a thought process around it. You need to have money to eat. I think that may shift up a little bit. Not quite sure how that will happen.
False evidence appearing real. Face everything and you will rise. Let that fear become curiosity and research. And you'll find that smoke and big face in the smoke is really sometimes just a guy behind the curtain working levers. Not as big as we make it out to be. And currency change will help us to move forward to, in the next 20 years, everything will be, look, think of Dick Tracy back in the 50s. He had a watch that you could talk into. Think about this.
Yes.
Dick Tracy said, "I need you to get here now." I can literally take a phone call right now live on your show via my Apple Watch.
Phone. Yeah, I know. We had a Jetson. Did you watch the Jetsons when you?
I love the Jetsons.
Yeah, I mean, aren't they doing everything we're doing now, except for we're still not doing the cars in the air, but pretty much.
Yeah, but that is coming this year. The truth of 2023 will be flying cars. The FAA is approving, just like drones. When I was in England a couple of years before the pandemic, they had their first drone delivery from Amazon, where the drone came over and a guy took out a 4x4 bullseye, and that's how the drone actually landed. So it had its package. The drone flew over, shot down to the bullseye, lowered down, dropped off the gift, lifted back up and took off. And it was the first official delivery in the UK.
Oh
So
my
drones,
goodness.
flying cars, that's electric cars. That is going to be the future. Whether 30% want it or whether 70% want it, it's coming. You can't stop it. It's like childbirth. You can't stop it. It's coming.
It's coming. It's coming. Yeah, yeah. It's like so many cool things. What do we talk about? Antarctica. We talked about air, space,
Yeah.
and the ocean. And the ocean's on the move. The ocean is really on the move, or it's expressing itself. I take into heart, or one of my beliefs is that the planet that we live on, it has its own spirit, has its own life form, has its own thought. And in some of the shamanic, we call it Pachamama is the earth and Cochamama is the ocean. And I have been feeling this for a long time, and now even more. Cochamama is on the move. The ocean is ready to reposition herself, and I'm really curious about what that's going to happen, what that's going to do. And I also feel that there's a sense of movement again in the the land is always moving, right? Where these continents are not sit still. I'm not sure you can see them move because they move incrementally, but I feel like we're going to have geographical changes, migration, moving from places that are no longer inhabitable. And I'm really hoping that will change the philosophy of immigration. That was what
It'll
I'm thinking.
have to, right? It's
Yeah.
either, we were talking about immigration in the United States right now, and they're actually coming up through Texas, but Texas didn't always belong to the United States. Texas belonged to Mexico. So, you go back to the US Mexico war for the fight of the Texas territory. People are trying to survive. They're doing whatever they can, whatever country they're in. So you're right, immigration will not be a matter of conversation, it'll be a matter of survival. And if there's a shift, and people would say, well, how could the world shift? Easy. We could have a meteorite that hits the earth in weeks, if months, if days. You couldn't change that right now with our technology. We're working on it. Or let's even just, my neighbor next door in Montana, Yellowstone. If Yellowstone decided to go up as a super volcano, overnight, half the world going east would change, all the way going to Europe, right? So overnight, things can change based on Mother Nature and the power of Mother Nature that we seem to have lost our respect for. And that can change, immigration, like you said, to where people, Antarctica, and the Great White Continent, people are like, oh, it's just an ice shelf. Antarctica has so many secrets that people don't even realize how many. We have the third largest lake that is an actual lake underneath the ice sheet that has actually been researched by Russia in the early 90s that is, full of microorganism life. And where there's life, that means that there's a food chain. I don't want to know what's at the bottom of that lake on the food chain, but as the ice continues to melt in Antarctica and that opens up land and resources, there's a reason that China, Russia, and the United States now are building iceberg fleets to go down to Antarctica. That's going to be a major immigration point of view. But if we have another ice age, guarantee you there would be immigration. There's not going to be any borders to stop people. You're going to go to where you can survive and stay warm. And California, I'm here in Seattle. I live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, but I also live in between two big volcanoes, Mount Baker and Mount Rainier. And I'm also on the Nisqually fault line that could rupture at any time, creating tsunamis and literally sever where Seattle sits in the Pacific Northwest and the Puget Sound. Same with California. There's places all over the world that could shift and fluctuate at any time, and there would be a global disruption.
So what we see as land, or what we see as our home, definitions could change. We could start to see some of those changes. I had this conversation. We had that huge thing with Haiti, people coming from Haiti, and there was some horrible thoughts and horrible actions taken. And I said to somebody, so what if Haiti people can't be on Haiti anymore? What if people can't live there anymore? What are we going to do? And we have to do something. We have to start thinking about this, because I got this, I don't know. So that's going to have to be, I think, thought about real soon in the next 5 years. But
humanity, right? It's the moral compass. If again, we go back to ignorance is bliss. If it doesn't impact my life, right? That's some of the thought process out there in today's society. If it doesn't impact my life and it doesn't disrupt my life, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, status quo, right?
Yeah. Well, guess what? That's going to be over pretty soon.
That's where the truth of comes into your reality. And some truths are nice and some truths are not nice. And at any time, that truth in 2023 can be revealed, which causes a paradigm shift, but a paradigm shift, not a fear, a paradigm shift to go, okay, we can overcome this.
We can do
human
this.
beings and
Yeah.
we can evolve, but it's usually through, and Deepak Chopra talked about this, great global change and transformation is usually preceded by great global chaos. So chaos theory begets transformation and change, right? And along the way, there's always going to be the pundits, the critics, the skeptics, the opinionators, the doubters, just like, every great idea is a horrible idea until it's not. And I always think about the Wright brothers, right? The Wright brothers, everybody told them you couldn't fly. You'll never do it.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, right?
And the other, think about germs.
Yeah.
Think about germs and all the war and all of the sepsis and all the things that happen time after time after time. And I forget when they started looking at germs, where you actually had to wash your hands before you did surgery. And there was a lot of poo-pooing that. And a lot of people died because of it. But then when finally it's like, there's germs, wash your hands. Then they started to slowly believe the proof that was right in front of their eyes. I think that we're in a germ play. It's like we're like doing germs, but
let's talk about that, because I've done a couple podcasts. I've been on the air for 8 years now, 8 seasons of Inspired Living Radio. And I've learned so much by doing it. People go, well, why do you do radio? Because I learn. I talk with experts. I get the research. I get the books. And one of the interesting things about germs is, one, you have to have germs and viruses for humans to be here. If there's no germs and viruses, humans can't live. You have to have that, right? And then the microscope was developed, and like, oh, there is all sorts of stuff that we don't see with the human eye, right? We have 3 eyes in life, 2 to look, 1 to see. But let's take the pandemic that just happened and the transformation based off germs, because if we go back 100 years, back to the 1918 to 1920, when the great influenza flu, people will know it as the Spanish flu. And the only reason we know it as the Spanish flu is because the only press reporting on it at the time was in Spain. We actually learned that the influenza flu probably came from the United States as we sent soldiers and doctors over for World War I. As World War I was wrapping up, we were sending doctors and soldiers to France to help with World War I. And then the great influenza flu started to take off. And they learned from the influenza flu that it was airborne. And that's where masks became the first concept of, we need to wear masks to eliminate germs. And if you're not familiar with an iron lung and what an iron lung is, you have your audience go look up and research what an iron lung is. At that time, you didn't want to be in an iron lung. But even back then, there was anti-mask leagues that refused to wear masks because they didn't agree with the science. And it wasn't being reported on by our politics and our president at the time. They were actually putting journalists in jail if they reported on. And that, if you think about today, your dentist, your doctor, your nurses in surgery, they all wear masks because that came from the great influenza flu, AKA the Spanish flu of our time. And then the Roaring 20s happened. And it's kind of interesting that 2019 is when the COVID-19 started to hit. And I heard about it before 2020. I was actually in Mexico on vacation and talked to a couple that just come back from China. And they had said that China is literally experiencing their Black Plague. It was literally killing people, and they were burning bodies in the streets because they couldn't control it. And then by March of this year, the first case that hit the United States was California and Seattle, just 8 miles away. Mercer Island was the first case in the nursing home. And then from there, 3 years of this COVID. And look at the debates about being vaccinated, not being vaccinated, wearing a mask, not wearing a mask. But I guarantee you, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, they'll look back at this point to go, this is where the digital transformation started to take place, where people are now working online and not even going back to their jobs in a brick building.
Right. Yeah.
Global chaos preceded by global transformation, and it really is, it's changed human beings even on their work. Nobody really hates working, but humans are innately mobile creatures driven by curiosity and a desire to build and a desire to explore. What's changing is people are not wanting to work for those that withhold the majority of profits or generate what we're paid by the hour to survive, just to come back and do it all over again. That's also changing. The Great Resignation the quietly quitting. These are two terms that have come out in the private sector and the public sector. Those are truths of what's going on, because the younger generation isn't like us, Nancy. They're looking at the world in a different way with a different mindset, and they're not going to work in a job for 30 years and get a retirement after, get the gold watch after 30 years of working for.
That's over. Gone. That's been gone for a while. It's been gone for at least a decade. The idea is to move from job to job, to learn more, to experience more, and to give more. And I think that job satisfaction, sitting still at a desk for repeat.
Sitting still at a desk is now the new on your route to being a heart attack, or it's very unhealthy. And just to use a real world example, Disney has just announced, their CEO just announced that all employees have to start coming back to the office 4 days a week. They're already seeing a turnover in employees saying, I'm not going back to work in the office. I'll do a hybrid. I'll work 1 or 2 days a week in the office, but I'll go and work digital transformation in the metaverse because I know that I can. And we know the technology, which was once a theory, now supporting the internet, can do that.
Can do it, yeah.
Even England, 70 companies are looking at change. They looked to do a pilot, and the pilot was very successful, to where you have a 4-day work week, you don't lose your pay, you have the same salary, and you have a 3-day weekend, 4-day work week, a 3-day weekend. And they actually showed that production actually went up.
Not really. Well,
based on the pilot.
Wow.
And so watch our work week. Here's a truth. Here's another truth. Watch the work week of how we work 5 days a week. Truth start to go to 4 days, because humans want to travel. Humans want to experience. They don't want to just work, but we want to explore and we want to create.
Yeah, more than, we all do it. There's an economic thing to having people at home take buy their own toilet paper, but the cost of having people under one roof is very expensive. And businesses are finding out that their overhead is much lower when people are working from home. And where they were worried they're not going to be productive, well, now that the deliverables can come through electronically, it's amazing to me. But you don't see big offices anymore. A lot of those office buildings, which companies and businesses weren't really affording them to begin with. They built too many out here anyway, but now they're becoming more and more empty.
That's me. I work downtown Seattle. I don't do this full time. I actually have a part-time federal job, and I've been part of that change to where, 5 years ago, you could only work from home 1 to 2 times a pay period. Now you're pretty much virtual. And when you go in the office, it's a ghost town. There's nobody there. But the ripple effect, I love that you said toilet paper, because, when the pandemic started, people were like, why was there a rush on toilet paper? Because people knew they weren't going into work, right? They knew they weren't going to go into work. But the ripple effect is people are not driving to work, driving 30, traffic here in Seattle is horrible. So you're spending 30, 40, 50 minutes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then, do your work and then drive home. That's chaotic to me. And the work-life balance. You can be at home and say, hey, I need to run, Junior to the childcare or go to the dentist. And there's a work-life balance that we've now been given. You won't be able to take that back from the people. They can try and they will, but it's going to be with great failure, because we have transitioned into the new digital transformation.
Yeah. I think the people services, though, you need the people services where you have to be with people hands on. That's going to remain, but then people need to be with people. That's another piece with the working at home, the isolation. People need to work with people. So we're trying to find a balance. Our society is changing and we're trying to find a balance, really.
Well, think of telemedicine, right? The Jetsons always talked, if you remember the Jetsons cartoon, to go to the doctor, you didn't go to the doctor, you got on the screen and your doctor would you could do your vitals through the technology. I haven't taught my naturopath, the last 3 times I've met with my naturopath has all been telemedicine. I go in and get my blood drawn and then repeat to discuss the labs based on via Zoom. But it's funny, I've been on Zoom probably 4 years before the pandemic hit. So I'm very familiar with Zoom. We've been using Zoom in my group for years. And so it's just funny that this is now the thing of how we do our interactions.
Yeah. No, I was too. I was already involved with Zoom quite a bit before the pandemic, and I was like, I would just do Zoom. I wouldn't do Zoom. I can't do Zoom. Yeah. Good for you. Yeah. So, is there anything else you want to kind of add to what we've been talking about? All right, I'm looking online here while you do that. I'm just going to see who we have on Facebook, but
let's give some shout outs. Let's do some readings. I would just say, we're at the slow turn. We're going through the transformation, just kind of going back to some of my notes of what I wrote down from going back to that tool that I talked about from numerology. But, meditation, visions, dreams, there's a lot of data around that that's showing that, this slow turn of the 7 energy that's in our universal year, because it's a universal number.
Yeah.
There's going to just be a lot of truths that are going to come into our reality that you're going to either agree with or not agree with. And some you're going to have to abide by, and some you won't have to abide by. That'll be free will and choice. But yeah, there's going to be just, the 7 energy is universal. And I'm looking at it as a positive thing, because when I did my forecasting in 2019, the words that I used, even to, 3 years later, sustainability, self-mastery, homeostasis, and homeostasis is a medical term between fight and flight. And that's what our nervous system does on a daily basis, is either you're fighting or flighting, you want to get to a homeostasis, and then the great coming together. And I don't know what the catalyst is for the great coming together. Again, is it a super volcano? Is it an asteroid from space? Is it a great tsunami in our oceans?
Yeah.
The globe, and think about this, the globe could actually tilt its axis, and it is moving, and that could disrupt everything. Immigration, currency, travel, jobs, career, all of that could change literally overnight.
Yeah. I think the Yellowstone, it was going to talk to us. And I went to Yellowstone because I kept reading how the different eruptions were changing. And so I took a trip to Yellowstone, never been there. I said, well, I'm going to be there. And I sat there and I just talked to Yellowstone. I mean, guys, you can talk to nature. You can talk to
nature will talk back.
And it will, and it did. And then it said, it's like this, the image that I got was this big dragon that was asleep. And that the big dragon was Yellowstone, the spirit of Yellowstone. I said, I have to flick my tail. It's itching really bad. And so I'm not going to stand up. It's not going to be huge, but I just have to flick my tail. So the tail's going to get flicked pretty soon. And there will be, I said, well, what's that going to be like? But
it's to have respect nature. One of the things that I learned of serving 8 years in the U.S. Coast Guard, and I was in some very interesting scenarios, including my first encounter with a UFO, which was a USO, an underwater submerged object off the coast of Puerto Rico, which is the tip of the Bermuda Triangle, right? So that's going back to the earlier conversation about, until you've experienced it, you may not believe it until you've had the experience yourself. But one thing that the Coast Guard taught me was to respect Mother Nature, because you can talk to Mother Nature like you're saying, and she will talk back. The question is, are we listening? And that's gonna, we'll have to wait to see what that outcome is. But yes, there's many things that could trigger overnight around our globe that could impact everything from everything we're talking about.
It's like getting a reading, and you want the intuitive to sit and tell you what and then intuitive kind of goes and tells you what, and then you argue with them. I don't want it to be that way. Like
that's ego, right? That's ego going, no, I gotta protect myself. I don't want,
I gotta keep this reality. This thing that I'm so invested in has to be this way. I want to know how to keep this reality. The reality doesn't exist anymore. The reality is going away. And but I find in what we do sometimes is preparing people, is teaching people how to think differently, or different tools to access. You said tools many, many times, the tools that you're using. I feel like we can, as intuitives, give people more intuitive tools and more creative tools that are from an intuitive place that will be more creative, be more curious, be more use. It's like using a screwdriver the right way, and did you know that the head was reversible, kind of thing. We have lots of tools at our fingertips that we don't even know we have.
So it goes back, we'll throw Darwin in here, because when Darwin started to write the theory of evolution, great debate, great negativity, great positivity, great that's not true, we didn't evolve. And he talked about, it's not the smartest that survive change, it's not the strongest that survive change, it's those that are the most flexible and adaptable.
Yes.
And so as we move forward, I would remind people, seize the day, the power of now. And you're right, as I've done thousands of readings with people all around the world, and they will agree and they may not agree. And I always tell them, I'm just laying out the road with some signs along the way. You're going to choose based on free will and choice which direction. If it says dead end and you keep driving, that's on you. I'm just telling you, there's a dead end sign coming up, make a change, go left or go right. But if you're not flexible, I would say be strong like bamboo, strong but flexible where you don't break, because it's the most flexible and the adaptable that will survive great change and transformation. And I even bring in Eckhart Tolle, the greatest agent for change is awareness. But like you said at the beginning of the show, some people don't want to be aware. They're going to put their blinders on. They will not see the trees through the forest, and that's okay. But I guarantee you, from history past, 70% will, 30% will claw and scrape and fight all the way. They're still doing it to this day based on, what change. So
yeah, that's true.
But what do we know for life? What's the one consistent thing in life?
Change. What can you count on? Change.
CHANGE. Oh, that's only 6 letters. I was looking from a numerology. Wouldn't that be curious? Wouldn't that be interesting?
7 numbers.
7, yeah.
Or maybe put an S on it, changes. But
Change it.
you can reach Marc Lainhart at marclainhart.com. His right up there on the video there. His URL, and you can find him on Mondays, Mocha Mondays, Facebook Live. Go to his page. I'm Nancy Smith. You can find me at angelscapes.net, and all kinds of stuff about me is up there. This is a podcast, and it will be produced and put onto Angelscapes Podcast Audio and Angelscapes Podcast on YouTube. So you can listen to all the teachings and the things that Marc and I talked about before we started giving all the readings. There's a lot of good information there. So I recommend you listen to it again. And I want to thank you, Marc, for coming online. This was terrific. You taught me a lot of stuff.
Oh, that's
technical stuff.
Iron sharpens iron, as the old saying goes, Nancy. You teach me a lot. And where can people find your podcast? Are you like streaming on all the major platforms?
I'm on all the major Spreaker, Audible, Anchor is my host. You can go to iTunes. I don't think they call it iTunes anymore. It's Apple Podcasts. So I feel like just look for Angelscapes Podcast in the Google and it'll tell you where it is. And then the YouTube would be a search on YouTube for Angelscapes Podcast. I have my own channel there.
Awesome.
And it's a lot of fun to watch. There's a lot of different teachings there. And I know that what Marc said has a lot of depth to it. So I'm positive that a second listen will give you a lot more information. So thanks a lot, Marc, for coming on. I know it. I don't know about you, but it's getting late over here. So I think it's time to move on.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on your show, and we'll get you on Mocha Mondays. And all of the information is at our fingertips. So go prospecting, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that dime within, because the world, even in the year of truth, has a lot to offer us if we're willing to change fear into courage, leadership, imagination, creativity. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you. All right. Well, till next time, guys. Stay safe and stay happy.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com. Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.